The bad news: Washington Times reporter killed. The good news: Washington Times reporter killed. What happened to fake news star Jamal Khashoggi in the Turkish embassy? Coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. I can't go too far without giving a big good job, guys, to my Washington State Cougars. We beat Oregon yesterday, or on Saturday, and so now we are moving up in the Pac-10, Pac-12 conference. I just dated myself, which was the only way I could find a date in high school. But that's another story. So before we go into our story today, please consider subscribing to this channel. We're getting so many subscribers, and we really want to hit that million mark before the summer. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and please consider a sponsorship on our Patreon account. All right, so today's story is Jamal Khashoggi. Who is Jamal Khashoggi? He is a Saudi citizen who went to work for the Washington Post. Now, who is the Washington Post, if you don't know? But they're responsible for an all-out attack, both legally and illegally, against the President of the United States. That is the Washington Post, and the total irony, before this story even begins, is that before he was killed, Jamal Khashoggi, and I am very sorry for his family, I'm very sorry about what happened to him, but I had nothing to do with it, and you have to watch, what you do and where you do it, or prepare to accept the consequences, as all of us do. So, what happened with Jamal Khashoggi? Well, before he was killed, he wrote a story that said what? That the Arab world needs a free and open press. Well, that's a great idea, and how ironic it's somebody as fake as the Washington Post whose reporter is actually saying that. So were circumstances a little bit different around the world, people might have a little bit more sympathy, but not knowing the details of what actually happened, which we're going to go into now, I think people are very reserved and basically say, well, that's the Saudis and that's the Arabs and that's those Muslims, so what do you expect? But there's more at play here, and we're going to talk about that. And before we go into it, just let me remind you, I actually lived in Saudi Arabia for 7 years. I worked with these intelligence, the secret intelligence people. I taught their Saudi officers. I taught their officers. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about when I talk about Saudi Arabia and what goes on there. Now, the first thing that we need to understand about this story, and I'm just going to go over it very quickly, is that Khashoggi went into the Saudi embassy, or the Turkish embassy in, I guess, Istanbul on October 2nd. And then he disappeared. People said that the Turks came out on October 11th and said they had evidence or footage that he had been killed inside the embassy. Now, and they said that this is because of their police investigation. Now, an embassy is solemn ground. It is the property of another country, and I don't think it's actually possible for a police investigation to actually occur in an embassy. All right, so that's one thing that is kind of suspicious about this story. Now, another thing, a couple of more things, and everything about that happens in the Middle East, there's always something suspicious about it. But okay, so Khashoggi, the story is, don't know where he is, don't know what happened to him. And then after Turkey came out and said that we have evidence he was killed in the embassy and dismembered and chopped into little pieces. Now remember, Turkey and Saudi Arabia are not the best of friends, so they're not going to really support each other in trying to cover something like this up. So now a couple of things have happened. Where Saudi Arabia said, we don't know anything about it. We don't know what happened to this guy, which is actually probably true. If you knew how inefficient the Saudi government is, that's probably true. They didn't know what happened to him. Now, as I said, I have taught the Saudi military for many years, and I have very many friends in Saudi Arabia, and they're really nice guys. Now, you have to understand something about Saudi Arabia. If you're going to be like this Khashoggi character, and just remember one thing, that they don't just see Saudi news, they see American news. They know what fake media is. And so when you have somebody like Kashoggi working for an organization like the Washington Post saying we need free press, when we know what the Washington Post's idea of free press is trying to overthrow a government, well, nobody wants that in their country, and nobody wants that who is controlling all of a good portion of the oil in the world, and is so that they can spend like $1 billion a day, and it wouldn't really bat an eye for their families. And if you want more about this, look at the Yamama deal that happened in Saudi Arabia and the UK with British Aerospace. Okay, so that is really what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. They have turned the story around, and now it turns out that he was killed in a fist fight. He was killed in a fist fight in the embassy. Okay, so that's this official Saudi story. And then there is another story coming out now that rogue intelligence agents actually carried out this mission. Now, let me tell you something about Saudi Arabia and rogue intelligence agencies. If Saudi Arabia is like a big family, they're a bunch of tribes united, and anybody on the outside of that tribe or those tribes has no protection. So Jamal Khashoggi took his chances, and he said, I'm going to go work for the fake media in America, and then I'm going to start attacking my own government. So what was the sense of that? So what happened to him, and as far as we know now, he's dead. So according to stories that have come out 2 days ago, the supposed killer of Kashoggi mysteriously died in a car accident in Riyadh, which is a completely believable story. So if you have a sense of humor and you look at the JFK assassination, it's just the Saudis saying, see, we can do the same thing you do too. So suddenly the person who supposedly killed Khashoggi is now dead. Nobody to talk to, no witnesses, end of story, rogue operation, and now it's all neatly taken care of. Now, while this is going on, I just want you to ask the question. So they killed this Kashoggi guy who was a journalist and who accepted the risks. Nobody, not even these journalists at the Washington Post, have anything to say about this woman, Al-Ghamdi, Yisra Al-Ghamdi, been executed, or nobody knows where she is, but most people think that she was executed at the beginning of September. And I actually ran a story about that, but nobody is even talking about what happened to this women's rights leader. So what is the deal with the fake media? Why is a Washington Post reporter suddenly so important, and then this woman who was talking about women's rights in Saudi Arabia has supposedly been beheaded? We haven't heard from her. Nobody's even asking any questions. There were 95 beheadings in Saudi Arabia this year so far, drug offenses, crimes, murders, etc. 95 beheadings. All right, so if you think that this Khashoggi thing is something that is something unusual or something that doesn't happen, the Saudi princes are really clamping down on their power. And anybody who comes into the kingdom and starts talking about freedom and voting and we don't need a king is not going to last very long. So that is why there is killing time in Saudi Arabia. Now, if you want to know why these things happen and you want to know more about the country, please read my book, Killing Time in Saudi Arabia, because it truly is killing time in Saudi Arabia. This is Deceptions of the Ages News, and we'll see you next time.